There is not just one gay community, there are many LGBT communities. And one of those which more and more gains visibility in the Bay Area and throughout California and the nation at large is the Asian Pacific Islander community. Tonight we speak with Vanessa Coe of one of the organizations which serves that community, API Equality. Welcome.
Thank you.
Now, I was reading your fact sheet before the interview, and it talked about how you believe, or some of the people at API Equality believe, that there is an inordinately large amount of bi, gay, lesbian, transphobia within the API community. You think that still exists even in 2013?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that it isn't proportional or relative to the larger community. You know, I think that there's definitely homophobia and transphobia in the API community. And because it's such a diverse community, we can't say there's one feeling that represents the entire population, right? I mean, over half of our community are immigrants. We represent so many different income levels. There are over 30 languages spoken in our community. And so it's just so diverse, there's no way to say there's one feeling.
That's right. Well, I mean, you make the point of my lead-in. When I came to San Francisco in 1986, it was, quote-unquote, the gay community. And, oh, yeah, there's some women, I guess we call them lesbians, and, yeah, there's some people who, you know, go both ways, that's bisexual, but no one talked about any other communities. Right. And then we talked about the greater gay Asian community. It was only within the last 10 years of my experience we started talking about the diversity and the nuance of the API community. How does that relate to not the API gay community, but to the greater API community? How do the two kind of see their growing visibility helping and assisting each other?
Right. Well, you know, we're one of the fastest growing communities in California. And I think that the growth in the queer community here is definitely relative to the population in California. So we're really excited to be gaining more visibility, especially in the communities we come from, like being able to participate in the Lunar New Year Festival, right, not just Pride. And so that's really exciting for us.
Right, and how long has that been going on? I mean, there was a time when certain groups didn't march, for instance, in the St. Patrick's Day Parade in New York City. It was like no gay groups.
Right.
When was it that the Asian community, and specifically the Chinese community, which has tended to be fairly conservative around LGBT issues, welcomed openly gay API members into the parade?
Yeah, I would say that we've been marching since 2004, or even before. And, you know, according to the research that we've done, you know, in the Chinese community, they're about 50% supportive. So, I mean, that's really great, right? I mean, that's pretty relative and reflective of the general population.
Right. What has been the greatest challenge doing the work you do with API Equality?
Yeah, I think that there's a language access issue. And I think
and
that
as you said, there's how many languages spoken within your community?
Over 30, right? So, you know, I can't speak every language. And really, we want to find messages that are relevant to specific ethnic communities, and it's hard, right, because our community is so diverse. We really don't want to go in and assume that one strategy works in every community. It's just not true.
Now, of those languages that are spoken within the API community, what would be the largest? I imagine Mandarin, Cantonese, but then also you've got Vietnamese, Tagalog. What else?
Right. So here in California, first it's Chinese. So that includes Mandarin, Cantonese, Fukienese, right, Shanghainese, all these different things that go under Chinese. And then Tagalog. So there's a huge community. So it goes Chinese, Filipino, Korean, and then of course there's a huge Vietnamese population, a lot of South Asians, and then a growing Pacific Islander community as well.
Now, you know, San Francisco has long been identified as a community which celebrates the LGBT community and has a large and very vocal one. I mean, you know, no one really has good figures because what is a census? But we always like to say, hence the name of this show, 10% of the general population is LGBT. Right. And of course, in San Francisco, it's about 18 to 20% of the voting population. How does that kind of, you know, work out in other communities in Northern California? Like, are there more API gay people in the East Bay versus the South Bay versus the North Bay versus Silicon Valley?
Yeah, I would say that I don't know those figures. I can't tell you specifically, but we know that 1 in 4 couples, 4 LGBTQ couples in California includes an API person. So that's a lot. But we don't know demographically, you know, where they are. Or geographically.
And so how do you go about identifying programs? I mean, it's hard because, you know, you put together programs based on research. How do you get the research into your community? Right.
So, you know, we bring in our community members and we actually ask them to do an assessment of our community and the work that we're doing. So we tackle 3 areas. What we heard from our communities is that people feel isolated, they fear family rejection, and they feel a lack of visibility. So those are the three things that we address when we think about things. So it's not just policy, right? We started out doing marriage to provide a progressive API voice on marriage equality, but we realized that just simply because of policy changes doesn't mean that our community is going to feel safer walking down the street.
Right.
So we want to create cultural change, and we want to be able to see that our community members are feeling safe, that they are no longer feeling isolated, and that they see people who look like them represented in different communities.
So do you hear from members of the API community that they don't feel safe walking down the street if they're openly gay?
Sometimes, yes.
And specifically where? I mean, are we talking about certain areas versus others?
Yeah, we're talking about, like, for example, I have friends in the Vietnamese community who feel it's difficult to come out to their parents, or to the Chinese community here in Chinatown, right? I think it's about wanting to be able to come out and live honestly with our families, but being afraid that our families will reject us. And so I think that's a common theme. And that's not true for the whole community at all, but there are a lot of people experiencing that fear of family rejection.
Right. I mean, and of course, outside the API community, one of the groups that is known for building bridges between families is PFLAG, Parents and Friends of Lesbians and Gays. How active are organizations like PFLAG within the API community, i.e., are they helping kind of break some of those API family traditions where you don't talk about this, and if you do talk about it, it's not something that's going to be embraced? How do you begin to break through that? Yeah,
so there are two things. So API Family Pride is actually a part of PFLAG, but for API families. So that's been really groundbreaking. And then we have this other project called the Breakthrough Conversations. And so this is where people are having one-on-one conversations with their friends and families about the issues that impact us as LGBTQ people. And so we're getting on the ground and changing hearts and minds one person at a time through these breakthrough conversations.
So when did you have your breakthrough conversation with your family? And what was that like?
Yeah, so I've actually had a lot, right? Coming out happens all the time. But I first came out in high school. So, but a breakthrough conversation is really issue-based. So I had one with my cousin, and I asked her, how do you feel about marriage? Because she's a really strong Christian, and I really respect and admire that and her faith. And I really wanted to know how she felt about that issue and me because of that. And she said that you're my family, and I love you, and my faith makes that love for you even stronger. And so I really respected that. And so that was one of my breakthrough conversations.
Had you already come out to her? Did she already know that you were
lesbian? She knew that I was queer, but we've never had a conversation about what that means. And I don't know how she feels about it, right? So I had to be brave and have that conversation with her, just like we ask all of our volunteers to do.
Are you going to tell her to watch this show?
Probably not. Maybe. I don't think she gets it because she's on the East Coast.
Right. Well, I mean, you can send it on YouTube. I mean, they see it.
Okay.
I mean, if she could see it, would that be hard still? My point is, even when you're out, is it still hard?
It's still hard. I still feel nervous. But I think it gets easier and easier through time. Like, I have cousins who are just in the Bay Area who are just so loving, and they're so thrilled and just excited about the work that I'm doing, and they support me in every way. And so, and when I first came out, I didn't feel that way at all with them. And I think that it's by having these conversations over and over in different contexts that has really changed them. Right.
Now, you're talking about cousins and whatnot. What about your parents?
Yeah, my mom is really accepting. I'm not close to my dad. She's really loving and accepting, but, she still calls my partner my roommate or my best friend, and I'm like, Mom.
Is that in English or in?
In Chinese. And I'm like, Mom,
so what's the word for roommate in Chinese, in Mandarin?
Well, she calls my 朋友 friend, 朋友, So I'm like, why do you call her my friend?
Because she knows, partner. So you call her on that.
Yeah, I call her on it. And she's like, why do you want me to tell everyone, And I'm like,
you're talking to me.
Yeah, I'm like, it matters to me, Mom. I want you to be proud of me and not to feel ashamed, And she's like, it's a private matter, and I am proud of you. So if you want me to call her your girlfriend, I will.
Right,
so I think it's just having those conversations.
Do you think, in general, it is more difficult to come out as a young API person versus someone in the non-API community?
I couldn't say at all. I think that we can't really compare, and so I wouldn't.
So you don't think there's anything to that old idea that because of family tradition being so important to Asian culture that it's harder to break through that versus a Western context?
Well, what we've seen is that APIs are the least likely to come out to our friends and families.
So that is true.
So there's some truth in that. But, I really wouldn't be able to say that it's harder from one community to another. I don't have the expertise or knowledge, but a lot of people in our community, 40 years old and have been activists their whole lives, have not come out to their families. So there's some truth there, but but I wouldn't say generally that's
Right.
true.
In our last few moments, what would you like to leave people with as far as the ongoing mission or work of API Equality? What you would like people to know about the organization and the work you're doing?
Yeah, you know, what we realize is that there's this huge issue where there are young queer APIs who are coming out, and there's a lack of mentorship or a lack of sort of pathways to do this work, to do organizing, to be politicized. And so we're really proud of this internship that we've had over the last 3 summers. And we really want folks to know that, you know, we're doing this work, that our first class of interns, they're all working in nonprofits now. And so we're just really excited to have queer APIs really taking a political role in our communities and standing up.
Great. Thanks very much for your work.
Thank you.
We've been speaking with Vanessa Coe from API Equality. Next up, we're going to learn all about pulp, noir, lesbian fiction. Our conversation with Monica Nolan. We'll be right back.
Thanks.